Greetings. Welcome to another installment of Behind the Headlines, where we at the Post and Courier try to give you a little look at how stories come together and what goes into the stories you end up reading in the paper and online. Today, I'm here as your moderator. I'm Glenn Smith. I'm the Watchdog and Public Service Editor for the paper, kind of a fancy title that basically means that I'm a member and oversee the investigations team. With me are two of the reporters on that team, Joey Cranney and Avery Wilks, and both of those fine fellows have been with me all year on the Uncovered project, where we are trying to shine a light on misconduct and questionable government actions around South Carolina. The story in question today first, before I get started, I want to remind everyone that the event is being recorded today and it will be sent out after the event with contact info in case you have any more questions for us. Also, I want to encourage anyone to submit questions through the Q&A function on the Zoom call. It's at the bottom of your screen. Okay, so today we've done a couple of these Uncovered talks so far. The one today is focusing on ethics fines and the little attention that public officials seem to pay to those. We've had dozens of public officials from across the state be fined for questionable actions, anything from conflicts of interest to failing to turn in campaign forms to nepotism, things of that nature. A number of them don't end up paying their debts and allow them to accrue, and some have let them build up to the point of tens of thousands of dollars. So far, nearly $2.9 million has been racked up by 370 politicians, local officials, and various other deadbeats who refuse to pay up, we found in our Uncovered investigation. So I'm assuming many of you have read the story. If not, I urge you to check it out. I really kind of want to get at sort of how the story came together. So first question goes to Avery. How did we become aware of this story? If you could tell us a little bit about the ethics meeting that you attended and how that sort of inspired you to propose doing this piece.
Yeah, of course. So I think we were always kind of interested in the Ethics Commission and its role in policing misconduct and investigating allegations against elected officials in South Carolina as part of our Uncovered project. So I just started attending their meetings every month, which are, if you've ever been to one, you likely haven't, not well attended. Most of them that I have gone to have been basically just me and a few Ethics Commission investigators there. And the one thing that struck me was I was sitting there and, these two candidates, one of whom is the longtime coroner of Orangeburg County, were being rung up on ethics charges and, pretty significant fines potentially being assessed to them, and they just didn't even bother to show up. And that kind of struck me. I understand, maybe not showing up to contest a traffic ticket, but I would have thought that a sitting public official would at least want to show up and defend himself or defend herself against an ethics violation, that could carry $22,000 in fines. And I was also struck by some of the testimony from Ethics Commission investigators about how hard they had tried to get in touch with this official to try to warn her that she was out of compliance with the ethics law, and just how often they were completely ignored. Phone calls, emails, letters, certified letters, they just struggled to get any sort of a response from the sitting public official. And a couple of things that struck me were just, one, the low regard with which public officials seem to hold the Ethics Commission, which is ostensibly our state's ethics misconduct watchdog for elected officials. And two was just how powerless the Ethics Commission seemed to be to bring these people into compliance, even as they were continuously running for re-election over and over again. So that led to us taking a look at the Ethics Commission's debtors list, which is a list of the people who are chronically out of compliance with the Ethics Commission for one thing or another, analyzing those to see how many of those were current or former public officials, how many were still in office while kind of stiff-arming the State Ethics Commission, and how many of those had repeatedly run for re-election. And I think we were really struck by just how high that number was.
Okay. So, Joey, question now to you. How difficult was it to get access to these decisions and some of this paperwork, supporting paperwork for the cases? How hard is it for the general public to find these things? How easy do they make it to locate? And what sorts of things did you find as you started looking into this?
Well, first I want to say we didn't talk about wearing a suit, but Avery just came from court. So I didn't want anyone to think he's intentionally trying to make me look bad, but
not intentionally.
No. The cases they can be quite difficult to look through. The Ethics Commission on its website, they publish a list of the names of these debtors, but they don't make it easy for a regular person to really analyze or dig through any of the records. Unlike other states, they do not post links to the case files on their website. And they publish the lists in a PDF, which makes it kind of difficult to search. There's no clues for any of the cases as to the severity of the conduct. All you really know is that an official owes the Ethics Commission money for some reason. So there's really no way to get at the underlying records of these cases other than requesting to review them one by one, which we did. We were able to obtain a sampling of a few dozen cases, which revealed a few striking things. Number one, just this mountain of cases where public officials were neglecting their duty to report to the Ethics Commission their annual financial disclosures or to disclose their campaign finances through quarterly reports. And those are important reports that are bedrock to any system of government accountability. And I think our reporting shows that officials in South Carolina routinely neglect them. Second was the level of cases that actually were a bit more severe than that. There are sitting officials who were caught having violated state ethics laws, whether it was mishandling conflicts of interest or failing to disclose sources of income that could present conflicts of interest. There was a mayor in the Low Country that was caught who the Ethics Commission found had mishandled a conflict. He had written checks to his own business from the town's public accounts. And he was fined several $1,000s of that. That fine eventually snowballed to tens of thousands of dollars, which he still refuses to pay. And then the last thing, one of the most striking findings from our review of the records is the Ethics Commission's debtors list is more than 300 names long, and we found about 50 of them are sitting officials who currently hold office. And that finding kind of dispels the myth from what the Ethics Commission has previously said in public reporting is that a lot of these, most of these, if not all of these, are people who were one-time candidates for office who didn't fill out their paperwork and haven't paid up their fines in the years since. But we found that that's not entirely true. There's a significant amount of money owed to South Carolina taxpayers by officials who currently hold office. And the lack of transparency in the state system means that I think it's fair to say in a lot of communities, people don't know that their local mayor or council member has been caught having skirted the state's ethics laws. People don't know anything about it. Meanwhile, those people stay in office and continue running for office.
Okay, well said. Avery, you decided when you first came to me and pitched this idea, you had this concept of wanting to involve as many of the partner newspapers as possible. If those of you who don't know, Uncovered, we have linked up with about 17 community news outlets across the state. And one of the goals is to really bolster their ability to provide some help to help them tell these stories they've really wanted to tell about some things that they've suspected in their communities. Why did you think it was so important to get these partner papers involved in this story, and what was the response you got from them?
I think one reason is that most of our stories we basically partner with one, or I think we've had one where we partner with two papers at a time, and we still try to tell a statewide story that any of our partners could publish, and it would make sense to their readers and it would be valuable to their readers. But this we saw as a chance because when we looked at the number of sitting public officials who are stiff arming the State Ethics Commission, they're all over the state. They're in every corner of the state. They're in basically every county. So we saw an opportunity where, and there's also just so many of them that it would have been a huge amount of work for me and Joey to call all these people and get their comments, get their side of the story, tell their side of the story fairly and accurately. So that was a chance for us to provide sort of our analysis, our findings, our expertise to all the local papers, and then they could go out and use our spreadsheet, use our findings, and we'd help them identify the local officials in their area and help them make the story more of a local story to them. So because there were so many of these officials all over the state, and most of our partner papers had someone in their coverage area who was out of compliance with the Ethics Commission, it just made sense. And when we called these papers, some of whom we haven't really had a chance to work as closely with, they were fired up. Some of them had written this kind of story before, but they'd never had the statewide kind of angle, the statewide impact. And so they were really happy to be able to do what was a local accountability story about their local politicians, but also showed how this is a much bigger issue across the state that affects South Carolina's ability to police, misconduct by its elected officials and really the lack thereof. So it worked out. It worked out pretty well. It took a while to get everything, set up together, but I think a lot of them a lot of the local papers were really happy with what we were able to provide, and we were obviously happy with what they were able to contribute.
Yeah, Joey, you've had a chance to work with a couple of the partner papers in the past on some pretty in-depth stories. I think people will be interested in what's that experience been like for you? How were you received, and how did you sort of balance that workload and combine efforts to bring the story to light?
As a reporter, personally, I would say it's been really encouraging. This project Uncovered began with the hunch that there are other local newspapers around the state where there are local reporters who just want to go about their work every day trying to hold officials accountable and make their communities better. And every step of this experience, I've found that largely to be the case. So that's been really heartening. I think I've also found through work with one paper specifically, the Independent Voice in Blythewood, just the challenges that strapped small newsrooms face, and the good work that they do in spite of those challenges. I co-reported a story with Barbara Ball, the editor and publisher of that paper, on a local schools superintendent. And what our reporting revealed is the broad authority that he has had and the power he has used to basically blacklist the local newspaper. And I think it's probably fair to say that other smaller papers in other communities probably face similar challenges, where if the local official doesn't want to talk to maybe the one local newspaper that's left, they don't talk to that paper, or they actively try to keep public employees from sharing information with the press. And that leaves communities in the dark. I had one experience with Barbara, who hasn't been granted an interview with that superintendent in more than 2 years, she told me. She and I showed up to a school board meeting, partly to just observe the meeting, but partly to try to get an in-person interview with the superintendent. And he, right in person with Barbara and I standing there, he basically just totally shut us down. He didn't want to talk. He said at the time, this was a few months ago, but he said at the time that the school board meetings were closed to the public due to COVID. That was not information that was shared with us in advance of the meeting. He basically just asked us to leave. And for us, that fell in line with the story we reported, which was about a total lack of transparency there. But it was just another example, in my view, of how challenging it can be right now to be a reporter in a local community where officials probably have more power than ever before to shut out the press.
Okay. In that same vein, Avery, I think people see the story come together at the end. It looks so seamless, and it's like, boy, what a wonderful effort. It reads like it just came together so easily, I guess. Can you bring people behind the scenes a little bit and tell them what it was like to coordinate with 10 different newspapers around the state and sort of meet deadlines and to take all that material that was coming in and weave it into one unified story? And how were you able to do all that while staring down a wedding date that was coming up right at the tail end of this thing? You're just about to get married and you've got all this on your plate too.
Yeah. Well, thankfully we can now say we were successful in both fronts. The wedding did happen. I am married now, so and very happily so, I should add, in case Jill watches this later. Yeah, I mean, if you've ever done a group project in high school or college, you probably know what it's like to work with several people. In this case, we were working with obviously me, Joey, Glenn, but also 10 other local papers and editors and reporters. And that can be, can bring its own challenges. People work at different paces. We had some papers that got in, some of the bigger staff papers, for example, going back to Joey's point, they could afford to take a reporter, give the reporter a few days to call all these officials, put together all these feeds and interviews, and then send them my way. And so I got those fairly early and was able to kind of work those into my thought process, and begin to develop themes and patterns for how these officials were responding to the fact that they were on this list. And some of the other smaller papers turned in their feeds a little bit later, and that was just because they are working their tails off to complete the daily miracle of putting out a newspaper on time. And so obviously they're doing everything they can just to design, to take photos, to write the stories for their papers. And then on top of that, they have to do, this extra work to help us out and get this story together. So some of that was pretty stressful, but it's about what you would expect for a group project of this size. And it was really fulfilling when it all did eventually come together. And one thing that I appreciated was that, a lot of them got the same kinds of responses from these public officials, and really held them accountable on some of the responses. A lot of the public officials kind of said the same things. I'll address it. I didn't even know this was a thing. The Ethics Commission didn't do a good job of letting me know that I had a fine against me, much of which, doesn't really hold weight when you look at how hard the Ethics Commission works to track these people down, to repeatedly warn them over and over again. And I think, we'd done a pretty decent job of coordinating with the local papers before those interviews, so that they were able to just not take those responses at face value from the public officials. And they were able to press harder and really nail them down on some of that. And you could tell after, in the course of them sending the interviews to us, as these local reporters pressed harder with the information they had, some of the officials basically admitted, this is my fault. I didn't do this. I'll take care of it, et cetera. So, it was stressful, and to make that long answer short, it was very stressful at times, but also really fulfilling that we were able to pull off such a big project with so many different moving parts.
Yeah, I remember in the midst of that too, that the Ethics Commission a couple times changed its debtor list and had to restart the whole thing at different points. It's challenging. People don't often see that. I mean, even today, we're doing this here at noon, and Avery was at a guilty plea in the VC Summer case, or sorry, an arraignment over there earlier this morning, and got out just minutes before this started. So what going on? Couple reader questions I wanted to get to. This one for Joey. One reader wrote and asked whether the unwanted attention from the story, sort of the shaming in the story, caused any of the officials to actually pony up the money that they owed for their fines. Have we heard anything about that? We get any sense of what the impact of this has been?
It's actually a great question because we spoke to one of the former longtime employees of the agency's former top lawyer, who basically told me publicly shaming the debtors is kind of the Ethics Commission's key strategy for collecting the fines, because there's no real method for collection. The agency kind of hopes that every once in a while a newspaper, whether it's a local newspaper or through this statewide collaboration that we've done, will publish a story, effectively putting some public pressure on officials. And that former lawyer told me that in the past, money would typically trickle in after those stories would run. So Avery recently reached out to the commission after our story ran to double check to see if any money has come in. Avery, do you want to say what you found out?
So, and we did, during the course of this story, we had so many people promise to address their fines, to pay their fines to their local papers. That was probably our most common response was, I'm going to take care of it. And, more than 2 weeks later, one person has paid her fine, and it was $100 fine. And she was someone that we reached out to, and she said she wasn't aware that she owed money to the Ethics Commission. But I think that really speaks to the fact that if you're relying on public shaming and not much else, that's just not a strong enforcement mechanism if you're trying to legitimately stop people from wrongdoing and try to deter nefarious behavior. So, there's still time. Maybe there's been more people that have reached out, tried to appeal fines and things like that. But so far, just one person paying a $100 fine since our story came out.
Okay, that kind of dovetails into another question I saw from a reader too about how South Carolina ranks in terms of its ethics laws and its policies and sort of collecting these fines. And the reader asked, can liens be placed against personal property or possessions as a result of this? Who wants to take that?
I'll take that. No, the Ethics Commission cannot place a lien on a debtor's property. That would require a court action and a judge's ruling that one of these debtors has been negligent. The courts would have to do that. South Carolina, the Ethics Commission does not take its debtors to court. Really, the only method of collection with any teeth to it is a garnishment program handled by the Department of Revenue, but that really only trickles in a few $1,000s a year. It doesn't really address the amount of money that's owed. I examined the ethics systems in a few other states, and there are other methods of enforcement that our neighbors use that South Carolina does not use. Georgia and North Carolina, they both involve the Attorney General's office when people owe money to the Ethics Commission. And what officials in those states told me is the whole point of that strategy is when the AG sends you a letter saying you owe the state money, that really puts people into action. It's the full force of the state's highest law enforcement officer, as opposed to this civil agency, the Ethics Commission, who I think it's fair to say a lot of public officials in South Carolina don't have a ton of respect for. A couple of other states, including Tennessee, also prevent officials from being able to run or rerun for public office if they hold certain debts above a certain threshold, which is something that lawmakers told us that they were interested in pursuing as well here in South Carolina, but none of those efforts have gained any traction here.
Reader asks, is it the legislature that makes the laws for this or the Ethics Commission?
The legislature makes the laws and the Ethics Commission just follows them. And, that's all they can do. The Ethics Commission can't go above and beyond their statutory powers in order to try to bring someone into compliance. And they don't. And so, there's always been this notion or this criticism that the fox is guarding the hen house, because if you're a state lawmaker, is it in your best interest to empower an ethics commission to, look into your business and to go after you? I think most people would say, in a Machiavellian way, not really. Of course, if you're for good government, sure, that's a great idea. But if you're for preserving your own self-interest, maybe it doesn't make sense to have a stronger ethics commission. So there's always been this kind of debate about whether the ethics commission is weakened, and there's no debate about whether it's a weak ethics commission. I think everyone acknowledges that, but the question is whether it's by accident or by design by the state lawmakers. So now there's sort of this push by some state lawmakers to make that law stronger and to make the ethics commission more formidable. But I mean, the main resistance to that is just inertia. To get anything done in the legislature, you need somebody really pushing it, making it a priority, getting on people's nerves, and being willing to put that on the front burner. And in the years past, front burner issues have been the gas tax hike and abortion and other social issues. So it's just going to take somebody to really champion this and push it through the legislature for it to gain some momentum.
Another reader here said she loves the discussion and the story. Thank you very much for that. Asked what sort of resources go into this. A lot. I mean, we have got all sorts of different people working on this from our partner papers, but there's also, we have a 6-member team on this. We have editors working on it, designers and social media people and photographers, and we added up. We've been sort of keeping track all along. I don't have the exact number in front of me, but it's well over, I believe, $80,000 that we've spent on this so far, and digested somewhere in the neighborhood of 40,000 pages of documents, I think, since February when we began. So it's quite an undertaking. And she also goes on to ask, are we going to keep following up on this and keep track of this? And how do we keep from rolling our eyes when these officials say they didn't know they had a fine? Maybe you guys can answer that.
Julie, do you have any methods that kept you from rolling your eyes, or did you just let them rip?
I like to just print all of the lame excuses. I think any reader can understand the difference between someone taking accountability for the fact that they're skirting the state's ethics laws and an official who did very little to make excuses. Put that out for the public to judge. And I think the flurry of those examples and those excuses in our story put together is actually pretty powerful.
Yeah, I think there's also, you can look at context to determine whether you should be rolling your eyes. For the official who left office in 2014, forgot to file a form, maybe changed addresses a few times and missed some of the warnings, and didn't even realize that a form was required. Sure, maybe that person deserves the benefit of the doubt. For the state lawmaker who ran for office years ago and was called out about his $10,000 in outstanding fines, promised to pay it to the local newspaper and then didn't, and then again promised to us to pay it. Maybe you look at that with more skepticism, especially since 2 weeks have passed and we were not told that that lawmaker was one who was paid. So there's obviously certain context in every case, and some people have more believable excuses than others. But I definitely thought it was important that we had people who used to work at the Ethics Commission, like Kathy Hazelwood, the top lawyer, who were quoted in that story, kind of breaking down a lot of those excuses. And to answer the first part of the question, I think we do plan to track this. We plan to follow up and write follow-ups on this. We plan to write about how this bill that would fix this issue progresses in the legislature and how much support it gets and who votes against it. So yeah, we certainly plan to stay on this issue.
While we're on things that we're going to do, maybe you could talk and give people a little sneak preview of the story you got coming this afternoon that also concerns the Ethics Commission and a longstanding rule that a lot of people in the public who file complaints have griped about.
Yeah, it's another maybe systemic flaw that some people have said exists at the Ethics Commission, which is that because of changes in state law, that again, state lawmakers write, when you complain to the Ethics Commission, you are sworn to secrecy. If you complain about, if you're a whistleblower and you're complaining about a public official who's done something wrong, you can't, once you make that ethics complaint, you can't talk about it to anyone, to your family, to the press. You can't go and speak about it in a public hearing to try to, bring attention to it. You have to remain silent, or it's potentially a misdemeanor that carries up to a year in jail for talking about it while the case is still pending. The investigation initially is secret, and if the Ethics Commission dismisses it, if they don't think there's anything to it, or they don't agree with your version of the events, then you're bound to secrecy forever, and you can never speak about that again. It's one reason why so many people have been hesitant to bring their complaints to the Ethics Commission over the years, and have instead tried to go to other law enforcement offices, like the Attorney General's office, with their ethics complaints. So there's been a lawsuit filed that I'm going to report on here in a little bit that challenges that gag order and says it actually violates the First Amendment, freedom of speech. And, a lot of people have said that these gag orders actually do that, but no one has, ponied up the money to challenge it and try to strike down that law. So that's what's happening now. We'll just have to see where that goes. But I just talked to John Kringle, who's been kind of following that for a long while. And he said that in addition to potentially being a violation of free speech, it's also just bad public policy to put gag orders on whistleblowers, because if people knew that there was a complaint filed against lawmaker A or politician A, and other people had complaints to file but had always been scared to come forward, it's kind of like the Me Too movement. More people could potentially come forward and bring sort of a body of evidence against a person who's been committing wrongdoing for a while. So I think it's an interesting story, and it's just one more thing about the Ethics Commission that could potentially be addressed by state lawmakers.
Great. All right. On that note, I think we're running a little bit over right here. I just want to thank everybody for watching today and for tuning in and for taking an interest in our work. I mean, we love what we do, and it brings us great, satisfaction to know that it resonates with readers like yourselves. Remember that you can sign up for any of our free newsletters at postandcourier.com /sign up. If you're a subscriber, I'd like to thank you as always for being so. And if you're not, you can sign up at postandcourier.com, subscribe. For a little plug, we're running a current special for first-time subscribers, 4 months of statewide all access for only $4. If you're, want to help as well, like I said, it costs a lot of money to do this work. We do have a investigative fund going that you can find at postandcourier.com /donate. But overarching, please just keep on reading, keep supporting the work, keep giving us tips. If you have any things in your communities that you think, just looks a little sketchy that you'd like to know more about, let us know. Just contact any of us here, and well, not Joey after tomorrow, but Avery and I will be here, and we will be happy to look into your tips. Thanks again, everyone, and have a great day.